Yá'át'ééh, bene. Good morning, my relatives. Hello. Today is Thursday, August 29th. We're at the end of August, and I'm sitting down with my second cup of coffee. And today I want to have a conversation with you about breath. So I've been reading a book by James Nestor called Breath, and it has really got me pondering about how basically every pillar of our lives, our eating, our drinking, our eating, our moving, our sleeping, and even our breath has been impacted and even damaged by colonization. And yeah, this book it's a fascinating book. It's a very good book. I'm excited to talk to you about it, but it's really spurred a lot of thoughts in my head as I've been pondering this some more. So I want to get into that. But before I do, I want to do like I always do and acknowledge I'm speaking to you from Piscataway lands. I moved here with my family from the Navajo Nation um, nearly a decade ago, and my Navajo people call this area Washington. It's Washington D.C. It's the traditional lands of the Piscataway, and I want to honor the Piscataway as the hosts of the lands where I'm living. I want to thank them for their stewardship of these lands, and I just want to state and remind myself how humbling it is to be living, eating, moving, breathing, subsisting on these lands today. So, my Piscataway relatives, thank you for your stewardship of these lands. Before we get into my discussion on breath, I want to just update you on my schedule. I have a fairly busy speaking schedule coming up at the end of September and going into October and November. As always, this is my busiest time of the year, so I'm going to put some of these into the chat. But on Friday, September 20th, I am going to be in Denver, Colorado at Denver Seminary. I'm part of a conference hosted by the Gospel Initiative at Denver Seminary, and the conference is called The Church and Politics. It's a one-day event on Friday, September 20th, and there will be four other speakers there besides myself, and we'll be talking about what does it mean to have a discussion in the church regarding politics. I'm very excited about this event. I think it will be a really good conversation. I'll be presenting a plenary, about a 30-minute plenary, I believe it is. All of us will be doing about a 30-minute plenary. I'll also be doing a seminar early in the afternoon and then be a part of a panel discussion later in the afternoon. The event is not only in person, but it's also virtual. And so if you would like to attend this event, I want to give you the link. I'm going to put it into the chat. But if you would like to attend that event, there it is. It's at Denver Seminary, Friday, September 20th. And it is both an in-person as well as a virtual event. You have to register to be able to attend it. It won't just be streamed live online. But if you'd like to register, it's free to register. And I think it's going to be a fantastic discussion. So no matter where you are around the country, even around the globe, I invite you to join me and several other voices at Denver Seminary on Saturday or Friday, September 20th. And if you live in Denver, I definitely invite you to come and join the event live. I think it's going to be some great discussion, a really good event. And I'm going to be in Denver over that weekend. So if you're in a church in Denver and you would like to, you have a possibility, maybe I could preach at your church or do something else while I'm in town, I would love to find some other ways to engage and interact more directly with people in the community of Denver. So yeah, if you're a member of a church or you're a leader of a church in the Denver area and you'd like to have me preach at your church that Sunday, I believe it's the 22nd. I'm going to be in town through that Monday. So I would love to find a way to connect while I'm there. Also, about a week later, on September 27 through 29, there is going to be a film festival in Rapid City. It's the Black Hills Film Festival. Here's a caption for it right here. And the documentary I was a part of, Bad Indian, Hiding in Antelope Canyon, is going to be at this film festival. The festival runs September 27 through 29. Our film is going to be shown on Sunday, September 29. I'm going to put the link for that film festival in the chat. And if you are anywhere near the Pine Ridge or Rapid City area, I'd love to have you come out and join us for this event. I'm very excited. I'm going to be there, and it should be a lot of fun. So that's coming up at the end of September, September 27th through 29. And then immediately after that event, I'm going to be flying to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And on Monday, September 30th, I'm going to be at Good Medicine Way. It's a contextualized worship group led by a friend of mine named Casey Church. And I'm going to be speaking at that event on Monday evening, September 30th. And that event will also be posted live online. I believe they have a Facebook page as well as a YouTube channel. And you should be able to catch the live stream there. And then immediately after that, I will be flying to Portland, Oregon. And I will be speaking both in a plenary session as well as giving a seminar at the CCDA, their national conference, which is taking place in Portland, Oregon. That event, and let me put up the caption for that here so you can see that. But that event is running from, I think it starts Wednesday night, Thursday, Friday, and it ends on Saturday. I am speaking in the plenary session. I believe it's on Thursday morning. And the theme of that conference is home. And so I've been asked to talk about, from a Native perspective, what does it mean to have home, to have a home? And so I'm going to be talking about that. I'm really excited to engage the CCDA community with that talk. And then that afternoon, I'll be giving a seminar on content from my upcoming book, which is called Decolonizing Faith. And so if you're going to be at the CCDA conference, I would be thrilled to meet you there. And I'm looking forward to being a part of that conference this year. So anyway, those are some of the events I have coming up. But what I want, and actually let me see who's online with me this morning. I see there's several people on. Yá'át'ééh, who do we got this morning? We have Mr. Phil Fox. Phil, Yá'át'ééh, Bennett, thanks for joining online this morning. You and I already had a brief conversation about my content. We talked fairly regularly, and it was great to have a discussion with you as I was kind of just getting my thoughts straight in my mind. So, Mr. Phil Fox, thank you for your friendship. Shantina, Yá'át'ééh, Bennett, good morning. Thanks for joining. I'm great to see you here. And Sharonda, Yá'át'ééh, Abina, thank you for joining from Columbus, Ohio. It's great to have you here with me this morning. I know there are many others online and a lot of others who will watch this later. If you want to get this episode later, it both is housed on my YouTube channel. I have a podcast there called My Second Cup of Coffee. It's also streamed live to my Facebook page. And then I upload it to the podcast streams on Apple, on Spotify, on several other of the major podcast streams. So you can download the audio there and get the audio of these shows there as well. So there's a lot of ways to connect with me and to get this content if you can't stay for the whole discussion this morning. But let's get into what I want to talk to you about today. As you know, Mr. Jordan Lott, Yá'át'ééh, Bennett, thanks for joining. I just saw your comment here. Great to see you. Glad that you could join this morning. Yes, I'm also very excited that my speaking is going to be picking up this next fall. I love getting out and engaging with people around the country. So this will be a lot of fun. But anyway, let's get into a discussion. So as you know, it's been about a year, almost a year and a half, maybe 15 months that I had my hip replaced. It was in the summer of 2023, late May, early June. And since then, I have been working very intentionally to walk more, to move more. I've been working with my diet. I've been working to sleep better. I've been reading a lot of books and really trying to incorporate so much more healthy habits and patterns back into my life. In the process, I've lost nearly 45 pounds. I'm probably in the best shape I've ever been in my entire life. I'm eating healthy. I'm cooking healthy for my family. And it's really had a all-around positive impact on the way I feel and the way I'm able to engage and the way I'm very, very pleased with all of that. But So one of the ways I've been kind of delving into this is I've been reading a lot of books about movement. You've heard me talk about Move Your DNA by Katie Bowman. I've been reading books about health and diet. You've heard me talk about the book Ultra Processed People. I've been reading books about sleep. You've heard me discuss the book Why We Sleep, and some other books that have come out. I read another book about circadian rhythm, which is called The Circadian Code. I haven't talked about that yet, but one of the things they talk about in that book, which I've incorporated into my life, is that book calls it TRE, time restricted eating, which I think is different from intermittent fasting, but I don't fully understand the full differences. But time restricted eating is basically limiting the hours in which you eat every day. And one of the things that book pointed out to me is when you eat most of your waking hours, and I'm not just saying you eat your first main meal, but when you take in your first calorie to when you have your first drink of beverage or bite of food at night. Most of us would say, well, we eat breakfast at this hour and dinner at this hour, and so that's our eating window. But we actually maybe have a cup of coffee with cream and sugar when we first wake up, and then we have a snack, a light snack before we go to bed. And so our eating window is actually not 10 to 12 hours. It's more like 14 to 16 hours. And this book highly recommends what they call a time-restricted eating pattern of literally having between 12 and 14 hours, but having between 12 and 14 hours a day where you're not eating. And your digestive system, your body is just able to rest, process the food you've eaten, and actually begin to burn fat. And the book made a lot of sense to me, and so I actually started doing it. I restrict my eating, my intake of calories now between 9 a.m. and 7 p.m. So even my first cup of coffee, I don't have coffee with cream until after 9 a.m. And I finish my dinner. My last bite of the day is usually my ice cream cone. I love to have an ice cream cone every evening after dinner, and that's my last bite of the day at 7 p.m. And I keep my eating restricted between those hours. And I feel good. I feel healthy. It feels like it's one way to kind of control the intake of food and the calories without going on a specific diet, but just kind of limiting the time in which you eat. And there's a lot of other benefits. I won't get into those anyway. But so that's one other thing I've been doing. I haven't talked about that book yet. I probably will talk about it at some point. It's called The Circadian Code. But I'll talk about that book. But today I want to talk about a different book that I've been reading. And let me show you this book. This book, and I've been wanting to read this for a while. I learned about this book about a month ago. And I have several ways that I get my books every month. I have a subscription to Audible, which gives me 2 free books a month that I can download. And so I usually try to get my books on Audible. I use the Libby online library system here in DC, and I can check out both Kindle as well as Audible books from Libby. And so I try to get my books off of that, the online library system here in DC. And then I also have a subscription to Spotify, and they have a feature where if you have a family plan and you're the primary holder of that plan, you get 11 free hours of listening to Audible books, to Audible books each month. And so I learned about this book, Breath. It was about a month and a half ago, and I wasn't able, I had used both of my free books on Audible. It wasn't available on Spotify, and there was a massively long line for it on Libby, and so I had to wait until my Audible subscription renewed this month, and I got it 2 days ago. It's a 7.5 hour book, and I read it in literally about a day and a half. It is, again, it's one of those paradigm shifting books that taking something as basic as breathing and realizing how capitalism, colonialism, processed foods has deeply and negatively impacted the way that we breathe. The author of the book, James Nestor, he's not a doctor or a scientist or anyone. He's just someone who has always had trouble breathing and started looking into it and researching it. And he was a writer at some level, and he ended up writing this book. And it's a very well written book. I highly recommend it. The book is Breath by James Nestor. Again, I read it in a day and a half. I listened to it in a day and a half on Audible. It was very captivating. And he kind of frames the entire book in this experiment that he was involved in at one point during his journey, where he was involved in an experiment at Stanford University. He had a volunteer for it and actually paid to be a part of it. There were only 2 subjects in this experiment. And it was him and another guy who he had met with and worked with and interviewed before. And they went into a 20-day program where their food, their diet was controlled, their exercise was controlled, everything was controlled and kept standard day to day for 20 days. The only thing that changed was for the first 10 days, they had their noses plugged and they breathed primarily through their mouth. And then the second 10 days, so the first 10 days, they breathe through their mouth. And then the second 10 days, they unplug their nose and they breathe primarily through their nose for the next 10 days. And it was a study to really see what was the impact of mouth breathing versus nose breathing. And it was mind-boggling, right? While he was breathing through his mouth for those first 10 days, his blood pressure went up. He began snoring at night. He began showing symptoms and signs of sleep apnea. He began getting nasal infections. He felt worse. He felt not nearly as on top of things as he did before. His health was deteriorating. And then when he switched to nasal breathing, to nose breathing, all of those symptoms cleared up. His blood pressure began going back down. His snoring stopped. His sleep apnea symptoms began going away. And even the infections he was getting in his nose began clearing up. Now, he is very clear in his book, and I want to be very clear here. He's not giving medical advice. I'm not giving medical advice to anybody. I'm merely telling you about this book that I read. Obviously, please talk with your doctor if you're going to make any major changes, especially regarding things about your health. But this book was fascinating to me, and he goes into some very deep discussions about different styles of breathing and the way that we breathe. And there were several things that really, I can't even begin to, again, this book was a paradigm shift for me. I'm going to go back and listen to it again because there's so many things that I just have to think about and reframe. I feel almost like I felt after I read the book, Move Your DNA by Katie Bowman, where I literally had to take like a week off after I read that book and just reframe my thinking about how to think about movement as compared to exercise. How to stop being so sedentary and not try to fix my sedentarism with exercise, but how to be less sedentary by moving more throughout the entire day. And I've made some pretty radical changes, and I feel like I need to do something very similar with breathing. I learned very quickly through this book that I'm very much a mouth breather. When I run, when I exercise, whenever I need to breathe a lot, I breathe through my mouth. I don't breathe through my nose. When I sleep at night, I breathe through my mouth. I know I do that because I wake up, my mouth is dry. I have to get a drink during the night. And I know very well that I'm a mouth breather. And so I've been working intentionally. I actually listened to a podcast by James Nestor before I read the book. So I actually knew some of the stuff he was going to say. So I've been working a bit on my mouth breathing even before I read the book. But the book really motivated me to start taking my breathing seriously and to really begin training myself to breathe through my nose. I've changed the way I breathe when I run. I changed the way I breathe when I walk. Whenever I'm conscious about it, I work really hard to keep my mouth shut and to breathe in through my nose. And so that's been really fascinating. But he went into why not only Americans, but most I hate to say Americans because America is not just U.S., right? America is all of both North and South America. And so why are most U.S. citizens or most people who live in the United States, as well as most other Western colonial nations, right? Whether it's Canada or European nations, right? Why are so many of us consistent mouth breathers? And he went back to some things that were stated in some of the other books I've read, which is one of the problems with eating our ultra processed food. And what ultra processed food does, what processed food does to you, is it removes fiber and it makes harder to chew, crunchier foods softer. It makes them sweeter and it makes them saltier. That's what generally processing does to our foods. And as a result of eating softer foods, we don't work our mouths as much. Our faces become less round and more long. Our bones get weaker, our mouths get weaker, and our mouths actually shrink. There's actually skeletal evidence over the past 150 years, since the mid 1800s, when processed foods began getting really popular in colonial nations like Europe and here in the US, where we started eating a lot more flour, a lot more canned food, a lot more canned meat, and a lot less things from the garden, from vegetables and fresh things, and things became softer to chew. And as our food got softer, our mouths got smaller and our breathing passageways began getting more cramped. And when we begin having, this is when orthodontic work began happening. And this is also where we begin having much more problems breathing. And so this book reiterated a lot of those same things, that one of the reasons we have such a problem with breathing in our country is because of the high amount of processed foods that we eat, which are softer and easier to chew and don't work out our mouth and our jaw near as much. And so we lose bone and our mouths get smaller, not only from generation to generation, but even over our lifespans. And so it talked about one of the things we need to do is we need to eat more crunchy food, eat more whole food, to get our nutrients from eating the entire food instead of just getting supplements or things added or enriched into our foods. And we need to actually eat the vegetable and not just take the vitamins and all these different things, gnaw on the bones instead of just getting hamburger, right? All these different things. And then he mentioned something which blew my mind. And I'm going to mention it here because this is what I've really been thinking about. He talked about, and this really caught my ear because I gave 2 speeches this last spring and summer on the Lewis and Clark expeditions. So I've done a lot of research. I read a lot about Lewis and Clark and their expeditions and how they had this exact same mentality of discovery that Columbus had. And right, they were just discovering the lands west of the Mississippi. They were still trying to navigate through the lands with the savages in them, and they were discovering the plants and all the things that we had eaten already, but they knew nothing about, and so on and so forth. And they were the exact same vein of Western colonial thought as Christopher Columbus was. But anyway, but this book mentioned a contemporary of Lewis and Clark, someone who actually worked with Lewis after the expedition when he was made governor. And this person's name was George Catlin. And George Catlin was an artist. And after the Lewis and Clark expedition, he actually took time and traveled throughout much of the same lands where Lewis and Clark went, just a few years later. But he wasn't going there to discover and to document and to claim these lands. He was going there to meet the people and build relationships and even to capture some of the images of. And he apparently has one of the best collections of artwork of Native peoples prior to white settlement, because of the way he went out and he met with people and documented things and recorded things, not in the way that Lewis and Clark were doing, but in a much more relational way, in a way to try to learn instead of just to explore and discover. And I want to share with you something. And so I haven't researched a lot by George Catlin yet. He was referenced in the book. It really caught my eye. I've read a few things about him on Wikipedia. I'm getting some other resources. He actually wrote several books that I actually have bought one of them. I'm going to start reading hopefully within the next week or so. But I want to show you, this is what they mentioned in the book Breath. And this is from the Wikipedia article about him. It says, Catlin is also remembered for his research and writing on mouth breathing, inspired by observations made during his travel. This interest is linked to his nonfiction work, The Breath of Life, which later was retitled as Shut Your Mouth and Save Your Life in 1862. It was based on his experiences traveling through the West, where he observed a consistent lifestyle habit among all of the Native American communities he encountered, a preference for nose breathing over mouth breathing. He also observed that they had perfectly straight teeth. He repeatedly heard that this was because they believed that mouth breathing made an individual weak and caused disease, while nasal breathing made the body strong and prevented disease. He observed that mothers repeatedly closed the mouth of their infants while they were sleeping in order to instill nasal breathing as a habit. He wrote the book to document these observations, stating that there is no person in society but who will find improvement in health and enjoyment from keeping his or her mouth shut. I read that, and it will describe later that he actually observed this not only in basically every Northern American indigenous tribe that he met, but he later traveled down to South America and observed it in all of the indigenous communities that he met there. And the observation of how our teeth were perfectly straight is an observation that was made throughout all of Europe once processed food was really instituted and made commonplace, and mouths began to shrink and teeth began getting crooked. And when they go back to dental records, going back 150, 200 years, before processed food, most everybody's teeth were straight. And once processed food and food became softer and chewing became less work, and we began chewing less and inhaling our food more, our mouths got smaller and our teeth got more crooked. But the fact that George Catlin observed that not only did we as Native peoples breathe through our noses, but we stated we breathe through our noses because it made us healthier and less prone to sickness. He also had one statement in the book. I haven't researched this yet, so I still need to look into it. But he made one comment where he said some Native communities, and this was in the book Breath by James Nestor. He was talking about Catlin's research. And he said some Native communities even would strap their babies to flat wooden boards when they were young, a cradle board, which is something my people did, but not that we've done that. And he said the benefit of the cradle board was it held the head in such a way that encouraged, even enforced, nose breathing as compared to mouth breathing. And so this book, going back to the conversation I had a few months ago about the difference between indigenous wisdom and scientific knowledge, going back to the quote I've mentioned several times on my second cup of coffee by Katie Bowman, who says the study of diet and exercise and health in the Western world is literally in its infancy. And she said the challenge is scientific data is not meant to answer questions about how to eat healthier and how to move and exercise more. That's not the purpose of science. But then she said, but when you live in an elder-free society, when there's no one teaching you these things, when there's no knowledge being passed down, when you dehumanize and destroy the people who are indigenous to the lands where you're living, when you live in an elder-free society, you have nowhere else to gain this understanding. And so she said, most of us are turning to scientific data. And I thought this observation by James Nestor, pointing out the work of George Catlin, talking about breathing. And a lot of times when we think about breathing, we think about yoga, and yoga is mostly connected to Middle Eastern cultures, right? That's where when you look up kind of the gurus on yoga, the leaders, the thought leaders, the people who practice this for the longest, the cultures that know these things, right? Most of them come from Eastern cultures. But apparently, here in North America, our people, the indigenous people, the original inhabitants of Turtle Island, knew that not only was it just good to breathe through your nose, but it made you stronger, made you healthier, and it meant you got sick less. And a lot of that knowledge, that wisdom, has been thrown aside and lost. The subtitle for James Nestor's book is The New Science of a Lost Art, right? Because this country didn't engage with the native communities the way George Catlin did. Instead, they engaged with us the way Christopher Columbus did and the way Lewis and Clark did, which is we were savages inhibiting their conquest, standing in the way of their discovery of this continent, of Turtle Island. We were obstacles to be overcome. We were savages who had nothing to teach them. There was nothing to be gained or learned from us. And then, after a century of ethnic cleansing and genocide, they took many of the few who remained and put them into boarding schools, just to make sure none of that savage wisdom escaped our communities and infected their white civilization. Breathing. The reason it's a new science, the reason it's a lost art, is because Western culture is absolutely bent on its understanding of discovery and its process of colonization. I've shared with some people one of my goals, and I'm writing this book, Decolonizing Faith, and one of my goals is I want to have conversation at some point over this next year with elders from many different Native nations to talk about their creation stories. I know I can read about them. I know I can learn about them in books, but I want to talk to elders to hear what their creation story teaches them about Creator. And I want to compare that to how the creation story in the Bible works and what that teaches about Creator, specifically regarding the flood. Most creation stories used by peoples and cultures around the globe. Almost every, not all, but many, many, many of them have a flood narrative. And in the biblical creation story, the flood narrative is caused by Creator in order to punish and destroy creation. And I haven't seen strong evidence that Creator acts the same way in the indigenous creation stories that I know. But I want to talk to elders to really learn and understand that better. And now I want to add to my list of questions I want to have with these elders. I want to say, what does your tradition, what does your culture, what does your ceremony, what does your belief teach you about breathing? Because apparently, according to the observations by George Catlin, breathing and breathing through our noses was absolutely central to how we raised our children. And we knew why we were doing it. We knew it made us stronger. We knew it made us healthier. We knew it cut down on the diseases we would have. And maybe I haven't been listening, but I have not heard my elders talk to me about breathing. So I want to go back and ask. I want to actually hear from our elders. So anyway, this book is it's a paradigm shift. So I ordered this book. I ordered it today. Book by George Catlin. It's called Shut Your Mouth and Save Your Life. And I'm going to read it. He's written several other books too. I want to read what he observed. Then I want to go back and talk to our elders, not just of my tribe, but of many other indigenous nations around our continent, throughout Turtle Island. I want to ask them, what do your people, what do your stories, what do your beliefs teach you about breathing? And in the meantime, I am going back, not to follow new science, but to embrace the teachings of my elders. And I am training myself how to breathe through my nose again. And it doesn't come natural. I had orthodontic work when I have a small mouth. I had orthodontic work when I was a kid. I need to work on teaching myself to breathe through my nose. I especially notice it when I'm running, where I immediately, I didn't notice how much I did it until I read this book, and I realized I'm breathing every time I'm running. I'm breathing in through my mouth, and there's challenges about breathing through your mouth because it sucks unfiltered, uncooled air directly into your lungs. And when the air goes through your nose works to filter that air and even to heat it as it enters your body. And that's why it's able to cut down on the diseases you get and the sicknesses that you have. Because the nose is a natural filter system for the air as it enters your body. And when you suck it in through your mouth, it goes almost directly into your lungs, unfiltered. And we know what's in our air. So I'm continuing to learn, just like I'm running in the morning, not because science tells me to run, but because I should have been listening to my elders 25 years ago. And instead of just watching the sunrise, as I started doing, I should have been running to the sunrise every morning to greet it with my prayers. I've started running again, and I'm transitioning slowly to barefoot running. And one of the things that's been happening is I usually go running around 6 or 6:30 in the morning. And that's right about the time the sun is rising. I can't see it come up over the horizon because I'm in DC. I haven't been going to the river as much because I'm trying to sleep more. And so I'm sleeping later in the morning, so I can't get there yet. But I'm moving my bedtime earlier and earlier so I can eventually get up early enough to watch the sunrise. Plus, I'm taking my daughters to school. But anyway, when I run now, I can see the sun come up over the tree lines. And I just started these past few days. I've been noticing it when I'm out running. And I'm treating my running. I'm not running to lose weight. I'm not running to get a better time. I'm not running to join a race. I'm not running to burn calories. I am treating my running the same way my ancestors did. It is a spiritual discipline. I don't listen to music. I don't have headphones in. Whenever I can, I'm barefoot, so I'm touching the ground. And it is a spiritual discipline. And now I want to begin doing the exact same thing with my breath. Believe it or not, I am beginning the process of decolonizing my breath. And I'm thrilled and excited to see what benefit that's going to have for my life, for my work, for my family, and for my teaching. My relatives, I'm so glad you could join this discussion with me this morning. I'm going to be talking more about these things. If you're ever curious about the best way to introduce people to my work and the things I talk about, you obviously can tune them into this podcast and let them know what I'm doing and what I'm talking about. But one of the other things that you can do, I have a TEDx talk out there. I filmed it about 5 years ago. It was 2018. And it's called The Truth Behind We the People, the 3 Most Misunderstood Words in U.S. History. This TEDx talk has been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. I consistently get feedback and email and comments from people about they saw this talk. Even some institutions and even corporations are inviting me to speak to their employees or to their constituents because of what they saw in the TEDx talk. And it's a 19-minute talk, and it's a great way to introduce people to the work that I'm doing and the conversations I'm trying to engage. If you are looking for ways to go deeper in dialogue with me, one of the best ways to do that is to subscribe to my work on Patreon. This is also a great way to help keep my voice independent. I don't monetize my social media. I don't benefit from whatever commercials YouTube may show on my videos. I want to give advertisers as little influence as possible over what I say and I don't say. So if you want to help keep my voice independent, you can absolutely go to my Patreon and subscribe to it there. And that's a great way to support my work and help keep my voice independent. And if you've read my book and you want to have a discussion with friends and family about unsettling truths and the doctrine of discovery, I have a great program on my website where if you order 10 signed copies of my book from my website, and you use it for a book study with 10 of your friends, you can do it virtually or online or in person, whatever you want to do. But I will give your book study anytime over the next year. You can schedule it with my assistant. I will give your book study a virtual 45-minute Q&A where we can sit down and have a discussion and answer your questions about the book and what you've struggled with as you've gone through it. And I do about one of these a week, maybe 3 or 4 a month. I end up doing these, and I love those discussions. Everyone is different. Everyone is deep. They're all kind of paradigm shifting for people. And I absolutely love those conversations. So if you want to join that, if you want to introduce some friends of yours to my work and to the book Unsettling Truth and expose them to the doctrine of discovery, hosting a book study, you have to order the books from my website, not from Amazon, but from my website. And I'll send you 10 signed copies of Unsettling Truth. And I will give your book study up to a year to schedule a Q&A with me. We'll do it virtually. try to coordinate the best that works with your schedule and with my schedule, and we'll have a discussion and a Q&A about the book. So anyway, my relatives, those are all ways that you can continue to help me bring this discussion to a much broader audience. I'm grateful for all of you. Thank you for joining me. I hope your second cup of coffee or tea or milk or whatever else your water, whatever else your beverage you're drinking this morning, I hope it's as good as mine. My relatives, walk in beauty. May we all learn how to walk in beauty together. Yá'át'ééh and Hakona.